Out of all the children's card games that are currently available for us to play, Hearthstone is one that has the most puns, and as I've been highlighted in other videos or even in peer-reviewed research, has a really excellent track record of actually translating puns instead of letting them just kind of fall to the wayside. So while unfortunately I don't really have that much time for games anymore in my day-to-day life, I do like keeping up with the various puns translations that have gone this game. And so because I really like highlighting excellence in translation, in this video I'm going to highlight excellence in Hearthstone pun translation from English into Japanese, focusing on the translation of Murloc, or fish-based puns throughout the game. Now, Murlocs appeared in Hearthstone quite early on, and from the game's release in 2014 until 2015, while there were a bunch of Murlocs, there weren't any puns in them. And then the Japanese translations also don't have puns in them, which makes them excellent translations, I guess. Because a Murloc tide color is not funny, and a Murloc tide color in Japanese is also not funny. Good job. However, this all changed with the release of the expansion League of Explorers on November 12th of 2015. In this set, Hearthstone produced no new Murloc creatures, but they did produce two cards which show or relate to Murlocs, and both were excellent sources of pun bait. Bait. Yeah. So these are Every Fin is Awesome and Any Fin Can Happen. Both are fin puns, pretty straightforward. So the question is then, did the Japanese translations team see these cards and then realize there are puns in them and then rise out of the seas to the challenge? You betcha. They jumped on this hook, line, and sinker. Because the left card, Every Fin is Awesome, just has one pun, but the Japanese translators went in double. The Japanese version of this you can see here, which is Erabareshi warera ni hirefuse. Literally this translates something like, bow before us, the chosen ones. However, as you can see, the word erabareshi, which is an old way of saying like chosen, is written with era in katakana rather than the kanji for choose. And this is because era are gills. So the word gill is then hidden in there. Likewise, hirefuse, which is the command form of to prostrate oneself, again in kind of oldish Japanese, is written with hire in katakana rather than normally like this. And yep, that's right, a hire is also part of the fish, that is the fin. So there's actually a fin pun. Really well done. Any fin can happen then receives a more straightforward but no less clever pun, as the Japanese doesn't have anything to do with fins, but instead uses this, which is homophonous with the phrase nanatsu no daizai, which is the seven deadly sins. Here though, rather than daizai written normally like this, big sin, it is written like this, replacing big with the kanji for sebream, which is normally tai, but of course, we can add a dash dash there if we need to make a joke, it's worth it. Remember that kanji though, because that tai kanji is going to come up time and time again. Did you see what I did there? In the next expansion, Whispers of the Old Gods, there were 3 Murlocs with unfunny names in English, so the Japanese ones were also unfunny, and we can move on. Is what I would say if I wasn't baiting you. I did it again. Because the translation team actually went above and beyond, potentially to make up for puns they couldn't translate elsewhere. One thing that's important about this set is that a lot of cards play off old cards, like corrupted versions of old cards. And so, while in English the names didn't often show this, in Japanese they double emphasize this by punning not off like just generic puns, but punning off of actual old cards that existed in the past. So for instance, the Bilefin Tidehunter is kind of like an earlier card that used to make a 1-1 Murloc instead of a 1-1 Ooze. The Japanese name starts with Maroku, which is just, of course, a Murloc, but then for Tidehunter becomes Taido Hentai, which kind of sounds the same, and Taido, which sounds like tide, of course, has again the kanji for tide we saw earlier, and then do in there as well, and then do hentai at the end can mean like extremely perverted, but it also means to change form. So yeah, look, it's playing in the 18 plus area, but it actually is not only used for, the like hentai manga kind of thing. This can also just be a word that is used in normal Japanese. Likewise then, the Corrupted Seer card does 2 damage to all non-Murlocs, which is playing off a Cold Light Seer, which gave all Murlocs 2 health. The name in English, though, doesn't really have a pun, but in Japanese, the starting part is just Cold Light in katakana, but the ending part is their Yogensha, which sounds almost exactly like the original card's Yogensha, only with a long yo at the beginning. And they've replaced the word for profit, basically, with a new combination of kanji that's not a real word, but, we can work out what it's supposed to mean from the kanji, which is Fairy Illusionist. So it's not like hilarious, but it is wordplay that calls back to the earlier card. Murlocs then disappeared for one set, returning in November 2016 with the Grim Streets of Gadgeton set. This expansion had 5 Murlocs and 3 had puns. Of these, 1 is untranslated. I don't know why, but I'm guessing that they just missed that chum can mean friend and, food. It's an easy pun to miss. And they did use dachiko for like friend, which is a kind of gangstery way of talking. So they, there's definitely vibes that are translated. The other 2 Murloc puns did see attention, though. The first one, Call in the Finishers, is translated as you can see here. The beginning there is just Yatsurani, which is like at them, which is fine, but then Fukaki ne Murio. So this is, again, literally give them a deep sleep, but once again, we're using katakana to emphasize that there's a pun hidden there, because Fukaki would normally be written like this to mean deep, but here you have Fuka, which is a large shark. Yeah, look, it's not a super common word, but they wormed the fish joke in. The second pun then requires a lot of attention, as it's kind of one of the most complicated ones we'll go into in this video, and that is for Finja the Flying Star. Now, normally, character names are translated pretty much literally because they're often actual characters in Warcraft and they need to have that consistency. But this is a new character for the game, so they were allowed a bit more flexibility, and they basically changed the creature's entire name. So Finja is no longer Finja. Instead, his name is at the end there, which is Rokumaru. Now, Rokumaru means basically 6 round, which isn't anything, but it kind of sounds like Murloc backwards, right? Rokumaru, Ma-Roku. It's kind of there. And that Maru ending used to be used kind of for names and also is used for boats sometimes, so it's like, watery. The beginning part then is basically another kind of made-up word, but you have fly blade hand style ninja. Now, fly blade hand there can be read as Hitode, which is homophonous with the word for starfish. So it's a ninja of the flying blade hand style, which happens to be pronounced like starfish, Rokumaru, working in pun after pun after pun to, in my opinion, pretty fantastically translate the high number of puns that are in the English as well. Unfortunately, though, while we've been swimming upstream so far, dark days are ahead, because after Mean Streets until December of 2018, there are not only a few Murlocs, but there's also a few Murloc puns to translate. Across 6 expansions, there are 13 cards which mention Murlocs, barely 2 a set, and just one of these is funny. Fortunately, it is translated as Burlock becomes Onzaroku, which of course is homophonous with, like, when you order a drink with ice in it. We gotta be very thankful that the Japanese language has borrowed an entire phrase for a way of drinking alcohol, otherwise we might be in trouble. After this adorable little creature, though, we enter another dry period. From Kobolds and Catacombs in December of 2017 to Madness at the Dark Moon Fair in November of 2020, we get 26 Murloc cards, but only 2 have jokes in them, which is just 7%, which is an entire shame, and people should be extremely disappointed. Indeed, one of these jokes is basically more wordplay than a joke, as Sludge Slurper is just kind of like an alliteration. Fortunately, though, the Japanese translators did not drop the ball, and translate it as Gesui Suisuri no Gesu, which is pretty fun to say. You have Gesui, which is sludge, Susuri, which is to suck up, and then Gesu is like an insult for somebody, calling them scum. So scum that sucks up scum. Scum sucking scum. I guess it works in English too, although it's a bit crueler to the Murloc. The second pun, and a classic fishy one, as Tip the Scales becomes Tojo, or like appear, Maroku Sentai. Now, Sentai is, like a Sentai series, a bunch of people in costumes, Power Rangers kind of thing, but they played with the representation of Sentai. Instead of writing it in the normal way, which you'd see here, which is battle and like team, it becomes Fresh, which has, of course, the fish radical on the left, and then again, Seabream. That Seabream keeps coming up. So because you have the fish and the fish, it seems to be a very appropriate joke. The next expansion in March 2021, Forged in the Barrens, gave us 2 more solid translations out of 8 Murloc cards, so moving from 7% to 20%, which is close to the ideal of 100% of cards in the set are Murlocs and all of them have puns on them and they all get translated. We'll get there one day. The first card, Lushwater Mercenary, with Mur in M-U-R, has quite a complex pun in Japanese because the Japanese version is basically Lushwater again, but then you have these 2 kanji at the end. Now, you probably haven't seen that first kanji on the left because, it's extremely rare, but basically, the Japanese word for mercenary is yohei, which is written like this. And it turns out that there's an extremely rare kanji that looks almost like the first kanji in mercenary, but for some reason replaces person with fish. So from what I can tell, this isn't really used in like any language. The Wiktionary for Chinese lists a fish that sounds like a pig or a type of carp, so I don't know, maybe, but it's not really used in Japanese. However, it has the same reading as the other one, and again, it's basically the same kanji except the person that's a fish, so 10 out of 10 job there finding this kanji translators. It's basically a one-to-one translation of the mercenary joke, except via kanji radicals instead of spelling. The translators don't stop there either, though, as the joke is rammed home in the flavor text, because in the English it just says you can't just switch sides because they have more fish, but in Japanese they stress that the kanji there is not a mistake, noting that it's not a typo, it's a brand name, which I actually think would have been better joke for the English too. I don't mind translations that aren't literal when they're literally better. The second card from Forged in the Barrens also goes above and beyond in adding 2 puns to what was just 1. We had No Fin Can Stop Us, and this became again Warera Ni, and then Zettai, yep, Zettai as in absolutely, but again, Tai is back, the Seabream has returned, and then Sakanaenu is basically a morphing of Sakanaenu, which is like an old way of saying you cannot rebel against us, or you will not rebel against us, but instead of the ra there, they've changed it to a na to put Sakana fish in there. Finally, I should note that the card Firemancer Flirgle isn't funny in its name, it does have a pun in the flavor text, as it says diss track spit and straight fire. The Japanese doesn't have a fire pun or even a pun per se, but I do want to highlight something very interesting because in their version of the flavor text, it says Kono maro ni hon no chotto zutsu dake genki o wakete kure. This is actually referencing a line spoken by Goku in Dragon Ball Z when discussing the Spirit Bomb, changing the pronoun from Aura, which Goku uses, to Maro, which I guess is the first-person pronoun that Murlocs use. So not only do we get a joke, we are also introduced to a new first-person pronoun, which we can use if we become fish-type creatures. Useful to remember if you ever get isekai. The next set, United in Stormwind, then has 2 Murlocs, and 1 has a pun in the English name. That's 50%, which is close to 100% goals we've gotten so far. This time we have a Fin pun again in Metamorphin. And in Japanese, the general joke is maintained. The Japanese name of this card is just puns on Akuma Henshin, or like turn into a demon, by changing the shin into fin to make it kind of similar to the English. Once again, though, the flavor text is also of note, as it copies the English but adds more punning. The English states that the dude has always wanted to be a Green Ranger. The Japanese states the same, but uses the Japanese Ranger, which is Sentai, and yeah, you got it. Once again, we see the tie. Look, if it's a good joke, why not use it again? Maybe some new players haven't seen it before. Things then go quiet until April of 2022 when we go to Voyage of the Sunken City, which gives us a whopping 13 Murloc cards, and you might think this would help us see a great bounty of puns, but no, there's not a single pun in English or Japanese. At most, a pun in the flavor of Gigafin exists, but it's a pretty easy one, as gigabyte in Japanese and English both contains a sound sequence which is homophonous with byte, so it works pretty much as a literal translation. We then only get one pun in 2022's Murder at Castle Nathria, but at least it's a good one. Again though, this time the pun is hidden deep in the flavor text of the card, but at least that card is a pun itself, as we have Murloc Holmes. Now the Japanese version of this card just turns it into katakana, so the joke works just as the same. But while the English flavor text reads, when you have eliminated the imfroggable, whatever remains, however uncroakable, must be the truth, which moves away from our fish puns to go a bit froggy on us, the Japanese involves no such betrayal, providing the text you see below. If we ignore the punning here, the basic meaning of the Japanese is more or less the same as the English. It's a version of Holmes' statement that if you remove the improbable, the truth is what's left. But the jokes start right away though, as fukano, or impossible, is written with fuka in katakana, giving us the shark pun we saw earlier. As we move on though, donna ni shinjirai nakutemo, or no matter how much you can't believe it, has the nishin part in katakana to highlight the sound sequence, which happens to sound like herring in Japanese. So again, no frogs, we're still fishing. The next set, March of the Lich King, brought 3 new Murlocs, but only 1 pun. It's not a bad one though, and it actually has kind of an imp pun there too, because we have No Fin's Impossible, which becomes Fukano, which has the same Fuka we saw earlier, but then Ninepu at the end, instead of something like Nine Da, which just kind of sneaks imp into the word. Anyway, if you're hoping this video will dull finish soon, you'll thank your lucky starfish, because after the card above, Murloc puns dry up for about a year and we get close to the end. Yes, we're left out at sea until the second most recent expansion as the time I was recording this video, which is November 2024's The Great Dark Beyond. While Murlocs do appear in the interim, none of puns in any other language, which is really sad. Although one card which was released at this time, oddly enough, did not have a pun in English, just being called Grunty, but was given a pun in the Japanese translation, because instead of using like an actual name for the character, they go with Hoheitai Fin, which is just foot soldier fin, and that's fine, but like, where did the tie go? You can just put it right there. Like, we were using it before, why did we stop using it? Have we overfished the kanji out of the sea? Is it endangered now? I don't know, it was right there. There is, however, one final pun that did make it through, and it's a good one, so let's highlight it with Brain Gill here. This gets a complex change into this sequence of kanji, which you can see in Japanese with that little giru in katakana at the end. The front part of the name, Zu no Sen, is a parody of Zu no Sen, which is Battle of the Wits, with the battle kanji changed into this, which means a hermit or a wizard. The Sen then, which comes from the hermit kanji, connects with the kanji for fish, creating Sengyo, which is homophonous with this, which means fresh fish. And then, of course, giru is gills. So we have like a Battle of the Wits hermit fresh fish gill if we jam everything together. A big brain pun for a big brain fish thing. Actually though, it goes another level, because the whole thing is also a reference to Zuno Sen Kangaru, which is a game from 1985. And yeah, it's very space themed. So there you go, I have no thesis statement, I just think that these are really great translations, and I like highlighting good translations. So do let me know if that kind of video is something you would like to mitai.